I guess for me, I always think about a song as a mini film almost, because I think it's one of the best ways to communicate quickly to someone.
That's Perth-born singer, songwriter and new mother Helen Shanahan, giving you a behind-the-scenes peek at her songwriting process. As well as singing, teaching, mentoring, writing and recording, Helen hosts the Songwriters Cafés, a new addition to the WA music landscape where you can meet great local talent in an intimate setting over a meal and delight in their stories and song. She's brimming with creativity and new ideas, following a decade of making records and soaking in musical greatness from Nashville to London to all around regional Australia, and now Motherhood, which is inspiring her to write even more from a heart of hope and gladness. Helen Shanahan is my guest today. I'm Sonia Nolan, and thanks for joining us around my warm table. Helen Shanahan, thank you so much for coming over to my warm table and being available to interview today.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's such an honour to be here. Having known you over the years, to see you in this podcast space is amazing. So thank you.
Oh, look, we were having a laugh, weren't we, Helen, that you've walked into my blanket studio. Literally, it is my office with blankets all around it just to absorb all the sound. And I'm sure over the years in your international career, you've recorded in somewhat more sophisticated digs than this.
Actually, you'd be surprised, Sonia. This is very comforting to me, actually. I feel like I could rest my head on one of these blankets.
You probably could. Now, Helen, what I wanted to talk to you about is, apart from everything, I'm just so excited that you've just recently released another album, which is is it your fourth album?
It's my... So full-length album is 10 tracks or more, if we're going to be so specific about this.
But there was a formula.
There is a formula, I tell you what. So it's actually my second full-length album.
Let's go through them because I'm so privileged to have been there from the very beginning, Helen.
Yes. So my first, they're called EPs, which are less than 10 songs on a recording. So my first EP was Girl in Love in 2009.
I know, a long time ago.
Yes. And then Driftwood was my second EP in 2012. Finding Gold was in 2015. And then I released my debut album, Every Little Sting,
That's right.
in 2017. And then my sophomore album, Canvas, in 2022 this year.
Which just happened. And It is absolutely, as always, a masterpiece, Helen. Helen,
thank you.
Canvas just seems to have so many different sounds that, it's got some sort of country feel, It's got some sort of rock feel, it just shows the expanse of your talents. I loved it.
Oh, thank you very much, Sonia. You're always so kind. And it was considering everything in the world at the moment with the little pandemic, to actually record the album was quite a feat in itself. So I'm very happy that it's out there, and yes, I think it shows a lot of different parts of me musically and emotionally as well.
So let's start from the beginning, Helen. Let's go back to teenage Helen.
Oh.
Yeah, far back. We're going right back. Teenage Helen sitting in her bedroom, writing music, singing songs on her guitar. Tell me about that, Helen, and where your journey has led you.
Dear. Well, I mean, to go back that far, I can barely recall now. No, but those years for me were very formative. I've always had a lot of I guess you could say nervousness and anxiety, and writing has always been a way for me to deal with that. It's been a way for me to work out how I'm feeling and go through life, just being able to get through each day, really. So when I was in year 12 specifically, I felt my guitar and I had my journal, and I kept a journal from a very young age because prior to year 12, I also dealt with feelings of anxiety. So I was told by a counsellor to keep a journal. So I kept the journal, and it wasn't until probably year 10 that I started to put music and the words together into song. I was actually... I loved theatre. Being such an anxious person, I don't know why. I just always had this love of becoming a character because it wasn't myself. I could get into that role. So I loved musical theatre, but for me, what changed was when I started, to write my own songs, and I actually left school studying theatre and communication and cultural studies at Curtin University. I didn't actually know that it was a viable career path to be a singer-songwriter. I actually hated the course at Curtin. No, I loved Curtin as a great university, but it just wasn't the right course for me.
But you did graduate from that course, didn't you?
I did graduate.
And you won Curtin's Got Talent.
Oh my goodness. I certainly did, and that was... I can't believe you remembered that, sorry.
Oh, there's a lot I remember that we'll go through on the podcast.
But you know what? It's funny you brought that up, because that was what made me think maybe I'm doing the wrong thing here.
Because the feeling you got when you won that and when you were performing was just inside you, and you knew that, hang on a minute, this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly. I thought, what am I doing here? I was actually controlling the sound and lighting in the theatre desk. I was like, what am I doing behind here? I got addicted to that feeling once I did the Curtin singing competition. And from that moment on, I attended open mic nights, and I really did become addicted to it. And then I decided to hone my skills further, and I auditioned for WAPA, the WA Academy of Performing Arts.
Which is incredibly prestigious.
Well, I was very lucky. They saw the rawness in me. They thought there's a lot of work to be done, and there was. And after I graduated WAPA, I felt like I still continue to learn to this day, but I had a lot more skills and a lot more refinement, and a lot more encouragement as well, that I was on the right path musically.
And during that time, that's when you released your first EP, was during WAPA times?
That's it. So I had released Girl in Love with my late friend Brian. He recorded in his parents' granny flat, and I had recorded that prior to WAPA. I think it was the year before I left. But when I graduated WAPA, I went to a kind of a more professional setting, and that's how Driftwood came about. And I got the courage to enter this national competition, the Telstra Road to Discovery, and it was with the tracks off Driftwood that I had professionally done that I got into the final stages and got to win the competition, which I got to visit Nashville on the back of that, and I got to do lots of touring, and it opened up so many doors for me after doing that.
And I've got to say that Driftwood is, I think, my most favourite album of yours. I love Driftwood, and I won't sing the songs, but I do know all the words. But yeah, it definitely was the launching pad for you, wasn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so you visited Nashville, so you made some connections there, and they then helped you with the next stage of your journey.
Absolutely. And Nashville is a typically... Whatever you've heard about Nashville is true. It's a music city through and through. Literally, I don't know if anyone has a normal job there. I feel everyone is a musician. And I got to meet some incredible people there. I got to do co-writing for the first time, which is, writing with another person. And it was just amazing. When I went there in 2016, I recorded my debut album, and the producer Brad Jones was just so encouraging, and he to have someone of that caliber kind of saying what you're doing is good, it really helped me stay on my path. And because I'm constantly having these thoughts of self-doubt. And, as an artist, you always have those thoughts. So, those moments just really encourage me to keep going, I guess.
And we all need that, don't we? We all need people to say that you are on the right track and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is what we were talking about a bit earlier, wasn't it, Helen?
Exactly, that's right, Sonia.
So you recorded your debut album, and I want to know the feeling that you had when you put that out into the world, because it's a big deal. There's a lot of your own, obviously it's your own thoughts, feelings, creativity, all on display.
Yes, and that is something that I still grapple with to this day. I felt a myriad of things. I did feel very proud, because for me, looking back on my journey, thinking about where I started, as just someone who couldn't even look the crowd in the eye, and, sitting down on stage, to saying I have recorded an album, in Nashville, I did feel proud of that. But on the other hand, I did feel very vulnerable, because I was writing about a lot of my, anxiety and putting it on show. But then on the flip side, I felt a release, because, I was putting my thoughts out there, and that comes with, it's kind of a cathartic feeling, and that's what draws me to music as well, because otherwise you keep it all inside. And for someone that's not good at verbalizing how I'm feeling with words, just in a conversation, songwriting is so important to me. So so the album, it had a lot of there was a lot of prongs of feelings for me there, but the one that stands out is just the feeling of pride to actually have a finished product that was worked on in Nashville with a wonderful producer and musician. So
yeah, it's quite an achievement. Just so fantastic, Helen. And it's interesting you're saying that having that feeling of anxiety and that you're writing about anxiety and so forth. I've read recently that especially during the pandemic time, people have found that connecting with music or some sort of creative arts has been incredibly important to them and really helped them with their own mental health during the pandemic. And it's quite, I don't want to go down a political path, but this understanding that we're not supporting the creative arts enough, when in fact that is the panacea to helping us get through all of the issues and the feelings that we have. So the creative arts is just incredibly important.
Oh, absolutely, because music, it just is the soundtrack to so many important things in our life. Not only, weddings, but funerals, everything, without music, we've got nothing. So it really does help us get through those tough times and the joyful times.
Oh, absolutely. And it is definitely that. It's a soundtrack to your life, as you've said. And look, on a completely unrelated point, I was seeing something the other day as well that said, it's really sad when the songs that you thought about in your youth and were what part of your soundtrack of your youth actually become the sounds that you hear when you're in the grocery shop.
Oh no.
That's where I'm at, right? So all of my favourites, if you want to hear them, just go to Coles.
It's in the next podcast, so you should do a best of.
The best of grocery shopping tracks. Helen, back to you.
No.
Helen, I really want to understand the songwriting process, because one of the things that you do is actually champion songwriting in others through a songwriting club. So tell me about the process and tell me about the club.
Well, that is a great question, because songwriting can come about in many different ways. And as I mentioned before, it's always come about for me from keeping a journal and then taking those thoughts and putting it to music. However, after a couple of years doing that, you can feel like you're stuck in a rut and it's not always going to work for you every time. So there's a wonderful club that I became acquainted with, I think maybe 6 years ago now. It's called I Heart Songwriting Club. And the premise is that you're given, it's a 10-week term, and each week you're given a topic and you have to write a song to that topic in 1 hour. And then you have to upload that song to the group and you have people in that group, songwriters from anywhere around the globe, because it's an online platform. And then at the 10 weeks, end of the 10 weeks, you've got 10 songs to share. And the idea behind it is not necessarily to have 10 amazing songs. The point is that you're practicing your craft every week. And because sometimes you can go for up to even a year without writing anything because you think, oh, that's not good enough, or I'm not in the zone, or I'm just too busy. But this program actually forces you to keep up with the creative craft. And I found that to be so beneficial for me because I was maybe getting to a stage where I was just avoiding myself as well, which I can do, when I've got so much on. I think, oh no, I'll put that on the back burner. So I got involved in the club as someone who joins the club, and I did that. I've done, I think, 7 terms with the club, so I had 70 songs, and through the club I was able to choose actually some songs that weren't so bad that went on my album.
So songs that were incredibly good.
So they were, and it was amazing because we got the feedback from the other members in the group, and it was just a great kind of collaborative thing as well. And now, because I love the program so much, I am mentoring other songwriters. So I've got youth groups, so people or children or young adults. I think the youngest age is 12. And then I've got people from all walks of life doing it that I'm giving feedback to in the group, and I'm also still a member, so I'm on my 2nd week of a new term now, so I've got my word today, so so it's just another way of doing it, but the traditional way I still do as well, but this is just a good way to keep practicing and not being so attached to having an amazing finished product. You just have to keep going to get to that amazing thing. You have to be okay with writing bad songs, basically.
Well, it's actually what all the major authors will tell you is that
Yes.
It's actually a discipline. And, I've read a lot about authors who get up in the morning and between the hours of 5 and 8 or 5 and 10, whatever they set their time for, they will just write. And they just write, and whatever they write, they write. And it is just this discipline
Yes.
to just keep writing. And eventually there'll be some gold within that.
Exactly. That is the idea. Because otherwise, if we're not, I think the founder of the club, Francesca De Valence, she said that, she didn't feel like a legitimate songwriter because she wasn't writing anything. But she said, I am a songwriter and I just need to keep up with the practice of it. So that's why she founded it. And the discipline is a massive part of it. You just have to be okay to wade through those songs that maybe you never want to show anyone. It doesn't mean you're a bad songwriter. It means you're just practicing.
Yeah. And there might be a line from that you use for something else.
Exactly.
So what sort of what are the key, what are the prompt words?
So
what's today's?
I actually haven't checked. I should have. I haven't. I'm terrible. See, I'm not even disciplined enough to
Helen.
But last week was Drive. So, and you also have an extra challenge. So the extra challenge was to have it as a driving beat as well. So you had to kind of have an up-tempo song. And you also
You obviously drive fast,
So, no.
Helen.
Yes. So I got that song down I do it now I've got a 1.5-year-old. I did it in hushed tones while she had a nap, just trying to get the song out. So the 1 hour time frame works well for me in that regard too.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is that there's that element of stress and you have to deliver within an hour. So you can't overthink it, which I think is really good because I have to say that overthinking is my superpower.
Yes.
If anyone's wondering, overthinking is it. And so actually having that time pressure, you just have to deliver and you can't be too hard on yourself.
That is a massive part of it as well. And it's just do not labour over one line as well. I think you just get it out there, get the song finished, and then after the 10 weeks or whenever, you can come back to the song and change that line. But it's just getting the creativity out of you rather than just, thinking, oh, no, I'm not too sure, which we're all guilty of doing.
Of course.
It's not to say that still won't happen, but it's just one way to, keep going and practice your craft.
It's just wonderful, and such great tips for wannabe songwriters who might be listening. So there's the
iHeart Songwriting Club, and you know what? I'm pretty sure there's lots of other things out there you can look at. But another thing that has helped me. There's an amazing book called Writing Better Lyrics by a man called Pattison, and he teaches at Berkeley in the US, and he's got this amazing set of tools for songwriters, if anyone is listening that's a budding songwriter. And one of the things he talks about is stream of consciousness writing, and I'm sure a lot of other writers do this too, but I do it a lot for stress relief as well. In a sense, you wake up every morning and you write non-stop for 5 minutes without judging what you're writing, and it doesn't have to be, it's not curated at all. You're literally just emptying your brain, and then you close the book and you get on with your day. And then you can look through that book and see, what was I actually thinking? And first thing in the morning, we haven't had any interactions yet. We're just kind of focused in on our senses and what's around us.
It's interesting you talk about lyrics, Helen, because I think one of your many strengths is your lyrical ability. You're an amazing storyteller, and throughout all of your songs, even the ones that you wrote when you were 14 years old, there is this storytelling, lyrical quality, and there, you can just feel the characters that you've created in your songs, and that's something that's always struck me, Helen.
Thank you, Sonia. That's very kind of you to say. And I guess for me, I always think about a song as a mini film almost, because I think it's one of the best ways to communicate quickly to someone. You've only got maybe 3.5 minutes where you have to get the listener's attention, and so that's why I do think of it in that way of a story, and trying to be visual or use the senses, and that's a big part of what I talk about when I mentor someone. I think, am I engaged for this whole 3 minutes? Why am I getting lost in a certain point? Maybe it's not descriptive enough, or I can't visualize something, or so that is a big part of lyric writing, and I do focus on that a lot in the mentoring as well.
How do you get your inspiration? I know that you've talked about journal writing, and you've got these keywords that sort of get thrown at you every week when you're doing your songwriting challenges. But otherwise, where does your inspiration come from? Because there seems to be some really personal stories in some of your songs.
Yes, well, that it does come from my interactions with people, and it can be even just a small interaction, and I would just focus in on the emotion of that moment, and sometimes it might be kind of blown out of proportion to how it actually was, perhaps. But
do you exaggerate, Helen?
I think that's what artists do, is they might take like a micro moment and they blow it up. But yeah, I do like to focus on just certain interactions that I've had, and focus on those feelings that I have from those moments. And sometimes I'm inspired by other people's stories, and sometimes I may have read something or watched something that's been particularly moving, but usually it is in my day-to-day, even mundane interactions. And I think that's why it's important to stay curious.
This idea of, taking something that seems quite ordinary and then just giving it a little bit of polish and a little bit of, extra emphasis.
Yes.
And then you can create incredible lyrics and stories from that. It's that's a great way to write.
Oh, thank you.
So you've been to Nashville.
Yes.
And then after that, you came back home to Australia and created more fabulous content and started to really try and position yourself locally and nationally. And then you got married in between there, so that was another great moment. And then you and your husband decided to pack up and we're off to London.
Oh, yes, we did. Well, that was something we had always wanted to do. We visited London, as tourists quite a few times, and I just love the city. It's just so... there's so many possibilities there, and I think there's something about it when I visit there that I just love. And so I thought, we both made the decision, we should just go for it and see what happens. And we loved it, and it was, we started from scratch. I had a few random jobs in the panic of just how we're going to survive. I actually I worked at this place called the Hummingbird Bakery in Notting Hill at the Notting Hill markets.
Oh.
And oh my goodness, apparently Gwyneth Paltrow goes there to break her diet, I'm told.
Oh, wow. That's some fame right there.
The cakes were delightful, but I was like, what am I doing?
So what you were selling?
I was selling cupcakes because I love baking. I was like, maybe I could do that. But I lasted a month there. And then I started to actually do some teaching, which I love to do, and I got to see so many different parts of London because I would travel around, take the tube and the bus to go to all these actually amazing houses. And I was like, I'm living in a lovely
living the
shoebox.
dream doing that.
Yeah, so that was wonderful. And
so
then
you're doing private tutoring?
Private tutoring, yes. So
in mansions in London?
A couple of mansions were involved.
Love it.
And I was like, this is elite living. And they were beautiful kids, and not all of them lived in mansions, but I did visit a few. And then I was trying to just do my music, which was the main reason for going there. And I got to a really good place, and I was starting to do. I realised my music is kind of best heard in an intimate setting, and I love, similar to what you say, Sonia, about being around a table and just the intimacy of just being in that space. So I started to do cafe tours because as drinking a cup of tea, I love tea as well. So I was like, have a cuppa and listen to these, stories and songs. So I developed like a cafe tour around the UK. So I did one of those, and I was about to embark in a Scotland cafe tour. And it was wonderful because, music's not necessarily always in a cafe. So I had to talk to the owners and say, are you okay to open your cafe after hours and whatnot? But anyway, we were on the precipice of doing another one, and then we had to pack up and leave in the space of 2 days because all the venues started closing, and it was just such a quick turnaround. All the students' parents said, we've got to cancel the lessons, kind of, I don't want you in the house at the moment because there is this,
mysterious thing. So I bet I can time that. I'm thinking it's about February 2020.
Yes, that's correct. Very correct.
Because the world changed in February 2020.
It did. So, I had some amazing experiences there, and I think we crammed so much into that year. I had some amazing gigs there, and the people there were so lovely and responsive, and I got to record a single over there. I wrote a song about kind of, now I'm getting political, but climate change, because
I loved that. That was the Unborn.
Yes, and because I was thinking about the future and thinking about the state of things, because as much as London is an amazing city and so vibrant, you do see the effects of just the amount of people living in one place, and the dirt and the smoke and the environment. You see, we're so blessed to live in Perth and see these pristine streets, and so it really got me thinking, and I was seeing those effects kind of firsthand. So that was an eye-opening part of living there.
I'm scared to bring you here,
once was a time where the air was clear. All in my heart, it won't stop growing. There was a time where the rivers were flowing. I wish my conscience was clean. I've done things to the place I didn't mean. I'm worried I made it worse for you. Don't know if I can bring you here, darling, it's true. Black insides, ugly streets, gaslighting, easy defeat. I don't know how to tell you, but we're all dying out here.
It's been a really interesting couple of years, though, hasn't it? Obviously, having Bonnie, that's been a highlight, one of the
Yes,
highlights
yes.
for you and Matt.
Yes.
But also the idea of having to perform during the pandemic when things are quite uncertain. But Western Australia has been in a little bit of a bubble
Yes,
during that
yes,
time.
yes.
We've had lots of opportunities that perhaps a lot of the rest of the world has not had. And you've had some amazing opportunities. Or no, I'm going to reframe that. Other international artists have had the most amazing opportunity to work with you, Helen Shanahan,
No.
such as Tim Minchin,
Yes.
Missy Higgins.
Oh,
You've
yes.
had some amazing opportunities to collaborate in the
Yes.
last couple of years because of the pandemic.
I know, and that's why I feel a sense of almost guilt that I was enjoying the benefits of, unfortunately, some of, the band members not being able to come into WA, so they had to look for kind of local talent. So I was lucky enough to step in in the instance of Tim Minchin.
They were lucky that you were here to step in. I'm just going to reframe that for you, but go on.
I know, thank you, Sonia. And yes, so I got to sing backing vocals for Tim Minchin, and it came at a time where my daughter was only 3 months old, and I was, these opportunities come at a time where maybe you think I had all this time before, I was a free agent, and now you choose this time.
When you're sleep deprived.
Exactly. But I loved it, and it was such a wonderful thing. I learnt so much, particularly from Tim Minchin, because I got to see how he worked in his rehearsals, and also seeing that even international stars have a lot of that self-doubt, and he was doing material that wasn't his usual comedic material. He had written kind of a personal album, and he was like, people aren't, they're here to see the comedic stuff. I don't know if they want to. And I was like, even him is worrying about what people think. So it made me think, well, if he's, one Tonya, I don't know, Matilda and all this stuff is still worrying about that, it makes me feel more, less alone, and that everyone is still, working out things in their own head, even if you've had all these accolades and whatnot. So
yeah. And I know I know the album you're referring to of Tim Minchin's, and
yes.
it's a really personal album, and it's really vulnerable, and I love it. And I think that people are starting to really respond to that vulnerability and to that authenticity, and that people want to hear that. They actually want to hear about people being real and writing songs about feeling real and feeling feeling unsure and feeling vulnerable, but also feeling excited when they step into their power. So I do think that there is a real need from an audience to hear those things. But it's interesting that, of course, when you're putting yourself out there, you're going to feel that vulnerability. And why should someone like Tim Minchin be immune to that?
Exactly.
Yeah, but must have been amazing to just be reaffirmed.
That's it. That's right. And then to see him just nail his performances, and no one would have known that he had any thought about that. So yeah, as a performer, it's interesting how you have all this self-doubt, you get on the stage and you just have to be in the moment and just do your thing, and he did that. So it was great.
Well, just as Tim Minchin inspired you, I'm sure you're inspiring others as well, Helen, which is really exciting. When you were doing your cafe tours in London,
Yes.
did you ever imagine that you would then take that same sort of model and bring it here to Perth? Because that's what you're doing now, isn't it?
Yes, well, I've borrowed from in Nashville because I did get the idea from the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, which is a very famous cafe in which the songwriters are in the middle of the cafe. There's 4 songwriters, and they each take it in turn to sing a song, and they do a couple of rounds. So it's called In the Round, and it's that intimacy. There's no pretense. Everyone's in the cafe just having something to eat, just chilling out and, talking amongst themselves. And then you get to hear these amazing stories from not one songwriter, but, a couple of songwriters, and to see them interact with each other. And it's just wonderful. So I thought, I would love to do this here in Perth, and there's no reason why I can't do it. So I'm going to, contact a couple of cafes and see if anyone will be interested. So more and more cafe in Fremantle were very, very open to the idea, and we've had 3 so far. We've had to have a pause due to everything, but it's been really great to connect Perth audiences to this idea, and it's really been so magical. And I wish sometimes I was in the crowd, because at the moment I'm hosting it, but they'll get to a stage where I take a step back. But just at the moment, while I'm just establishing it, I'm in the round every time, so everyone will have to hear me every time.
Oh, a bonus.
But yeah, I'm just really happy that I've been able to follow through with that idea, and it's been wonderful.
So more and more cafe in Fremantle has
Yes.
really leapt onto this, and really, because it's right up their alley, and it's right in the Fremantle sort of pocket, isn't it? That sort of
Yes.
intimate, beautiful, creative soul evening.
Yes.
How many people are able to come to those events?
We started with 80. Now we're at 75% capacity. So it is a very small space. So we're very aware during this time to not overcrowd the space. So currently we've got 60 people we're allowing in, and we've looked at other spaces, but we think there's something magical about this room there, and we could move to a different, bigger space, but that kind of defeats the idea of it. So,
Yes.
so we want to keep making it, something that people want to come to, and hopefully, if you miss out on one show, you'll want to come to the next one. And there's always different performers, and I think it's good to have. There's a variety there that you get to. It's one person at a time sharing their story. So
it sounds amazing. I'm going to get to one. I keep seeing it come up to, sort of advertised on my Facebook feed. And I think, I've just got to do it. I'm going to come along one of those nights, because they just sound incredibly magical. And again, coming back to this need for intimacy and this need for connection and this smaller, I think we're more comfortable, given, what's happened in the last few years. I think we're more comfortable with just a smaller group rather than a larger group.
Yes.
And so I just think this is just your time, Helen. This is all just sort of converging into being so reflective of who you are as a performer, how you can actually share your gifts and talents and your songwriting and create something that people are actually wanting to connect with in a forum that they're comfortable being in. So I just think it just ticks all the boxes.
Thank you, Sonia. Well, you will be a VIP guest anytime you want to come. You're
How
just
fabulous.
on the guest list.
We will make that happen for sure, for sure. Helen, I've got a few short and sweet questions and answers for us around, which are specific to my warm table. I want to know who sat around your table as you were growing up.
So that would be my entire family. So that would be my mum, my dad, and my 2 sisters. Up until for 16 years, that was us around the table until my brother came along as a beautiful gift to our family when I was in year 11. So then my younger brother would join us as well. So, yeah, that's a Shanahan family clan.
That's a Shanahan family clan. And I remember you and your first album, you've actually got a song about your little brother, haven't you?
Yes, it's called Little Boy, and I did write that while hearing his dulcet tones in the middle of the night. So.
Screeching. Yeah, and I remember loving that song, that song. Some wisdom or phrases, that when you were sitting around the table, were there any words of wisdom? I know your mum and dad, and I'm sure there were some words of wisdom that were imparted that guided you then and still guide you today.
Well, my dad always said, what was the best thing that happened to you today when we were gathered around the table at the dinner table? Because I think they always tried to foster, positivity. And especially when I was kind of maybe down about a lot of things, they were always trying to look for the positives in life. So that I think my dad's way of trying to get us to think about, what was the best thing that happened to me? I was trying to think about the positives.
And do you think that you're going to take that forward around your table when you, you've got a table that you're sitting around with Matt, and I'm sure it's probably a bit messier with Bonnie at the moment.
It is, but absolutely, I really do want to incorporate that. So thank you, Dad. Love you, Dad.
And is there a food memory or a recipe that you'd like to share from your table to ours?
Well, I thought long and hard about this, Sonia, and this is not really a dinner recipe. This is actually a dessert, and it's I had in year 4 of all years, we had to all contribute a recipe to this book, and one of them was a choc chip cookie recipe, and I know it sounds like just an average thing, but this recipe I could describe it as a hug in a cookie.
Oh, sounds divine.
It's literally, I've got the recipe here. I don't have to say it out loud.
Maybe we'll put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes.
Yes.
But I've been making these cookies since we got this in pre-primary, and I make these cookies for all my school friends. I made it for my family. If anyone's going through a hard time or anything, I always baked a bunch of these cookies and would deliver it to their doorstep. So and my mum's actually got this cookie recipe. She's actually surpassed my recipe now. So, Mum, I need to get your advice. But yeah.
I love it. Oh, I can't wait to make it and taste them. They sound divine. You've mentioned the beautiful Bonnie.
Yes.
So she's about 18 months now?
Yeah, well, she's 17 and 17 months, approaching 18. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly what early mothers need to know, is that exact sort of moment. Exactly. Because every month is different. They change so quickly.
They really do.
Which is just beautiful. But do you think motherhood has changed the way you write? I'm sure you write in 45-minute sleep cycles now.
Yes, the main thing is the time, for sure.
But has it changed sort of some of the, I don't know, I felt when I had children that it opened up new chambers in my heart. That's the only way that I can describe it. Oh. But, do you feel that it's unlocked anything more that you want to express in your writing?
I think it's made me want to be a more positive force, and it's because I feel like with my last album I did delve into a lot of parts of me that I guess one could say negative thoughts and feeling low self-esteem, low self-worth, and having Bonnie has made me want to just have more self-esteem basically, and to teach her, because my husband Matt always says, don't talk down about yourself, what are you showing to Bonnie in that way? So it's made me think, okay, I need to re-look at how I'm talking to myself, and that includes through song as well. So I think it's made me, not that all my songs are going to be really 100%.
You're not going to turn into Patsy Cline. No.
I could never, and there is something that draws a songwriter into more, sorrowful songs. But, it's just made me it's more about the self-talk, and whether or not that's going to come through in my songwriting, I'm not so sure, but I hope it will, and I just want to be the best version of myself, I guess, to show a good example for Bonnie, and I'd hate her to have the low self-worth that I did have. So
that's so powerful, Helen. It really is. And that we are our own worst critics.
Yes,
And I often say to my other friends, and I was going to say it to you too, Helen, is that don't talk to my friend Helen like that, you know, because you wouldn't talk to anyone else in the way that we talk to ourselves sometimes.
Exactly.
So it's really important that we are our own best friend in many times. So I can hear that in what you're wanting to achieve, and such a great mission to do that, and what a great reason with Bonnie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she is a positive light in my life, that's for sure.
What I've loved seeing is because you take her along to most of your gigs.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you'll often see on Helen's social media this backstage sort of behind the scenes where you've got this beautiful little cherub with these pink headphones on. How does she go with the concerts?
Well, I don't know exactly because
you're performing.
But she's always from the get-go. She's been around music, and that's just because my husband Matt is also a singer. But, you know, even when I was doing, at 3 months old, when I was learning all these backing vocals, she had all this music. Matt would play her a variety of songs. He would try and play her my songs. In fact, Driftwood, I think I gave myself, $3 from Spotify or something, just continuously she was listening to it. And so she does love it and is calmed by it, and she goes into a trance-like state. So I was still breastfeeding, and she would not take the bottle, so that was a big reason why she was at my gigs as well.
She wasn't just your biggest fan, she was your biggest fan.
She needed sustenance, and I was the only way she was going to get that, and she was very stubborn about that. So I was feeding her in all sorts of places, and I was like, how is she going to go at the gig? But she would just look, and she was going into a trance. It was like amazing how that just soothed her on that level. So in the early days, I don't know if that will continue on as she grows, but certainly in the early months and now she definitely, it's like she goes into another world. She just sits and listens to it. So that's amazing.
Well, I think what's amazing, Helen, is just your storytelling there about the fact that you're performing. Bonnie's little and she's backstage, so she's with you all the time. Yes. You're performing and breastfeeding and you're overtired. And, I mean, you're just an incredible woman, Helen. You are just living your dream and your passion and doing what is so natural to you, which is, performing. You've maintained your independence, and that's something I really want to talk about too, is that you've had offers from record companies to join them. And one thing that you've been really determined about is to maintain your independence. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think in this day and age, actually having a record deal is not as enticing as it once was. It's the landscape has totally changed for musicians. Back maybe in the 90s, if you had a record deal, you'd be everywhere. But these days, if you sign, and this is not always the case, so please don't get me wrong if I don't want to deter anyone, but you sign away so much of who you are. You sign away your ability to know, for instance, when that song will be released. The timeline is no longer under your control. Your image is, determined by not just you, by a lot of people. And for me, I've never been someone that's, really described as cool or, that's just, and for someone to try and get me to be that way, it just wouldn't be authentic. And if I was to go on to maybe sell a bunch of records just because I then looked or sounded or acted a certain way, I wouldn't be following through with my authentic life. And maybe, I'm not selling a million records, but I know that I've remained true to who I am. I own everything. I control the timeline. I control how I look and how I talk. And even though, I definitely require help in a lot of the ways that a record company would assist. I'm not saying I don't need help in that regard, but I can choose who to work with, and I can choose that, and I think that is the difference, and also the money side of things is you may be. They may pay for everything, but you'll eventually have to pay that all back. And I'm already, trying to fund my own way. So, there's a lot of reasons why, it would have to be the exact right company to come along to offer you everything in that regard. So yeah, it's a different world for sure.
Yeah, it really sounds like it, but it sounds so empowering the way that you're doing it, because you are remaining very, very true to who you are.
Yes, exactly, that's right. And it's I'm so grateful to my support network, and Sonia, you especially, and for all your listeners, Sonia has been with me. She helped me with my very first EP in 2009 with my PR needs, and she's been a constant encouragement and support to me. And I just want to thank you, and please do not edit this out of the podcast.
The thought did cross my mind.
Do not do that, because it's people like you that make me think I can keep doing it independently. And I'm very, very lucky in that regard.
And have you got a favourite? That's actually a question I did want to ask you. It's probably like asking, have you got a favourite child, which currently you do because you've only got one, Bonnie. But, do you have a favourite song?
You told me to think about this, and it is very hard. I think the one that I keep coming back to is because I got to co-write this song with one of my favourite songwriters, Kim Ritchie, and it is a song I like to finish my set on, and I get the crowd to actually join in. So it's called Finding Gold, and I think that actually sums up a lot of my message, which is, even though there will be moments of hardship, we can always find a moment of gold. Nothing is ever going to be that bad that you can't find like a glimmer of hope. And so I think that song definitely is special to me in that way.
I think that is a great way to end our discussion today. It has been an absolute privilege to have you come over and to see you again.
Oh, you
and
too.
I thank you so much and wish you the very, very best, and can't speak more highly about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and the energy and inspiration you give to others to be their authentic self and to really let that creative spirit shine.
Oh, thank you so much, Sonia.
You've been listening to My Warm Table with Sonia Nolan. In Italian, a tavola calda is a warm and welcoming table where you can share big ideas, friendship, laughter and life. So much happens around the kitchen table, and I wanted to amplify it here in this podcast. My aim is to feed your mind and soul through smart conversations with heart. No topic is off limits, but good table manners rule. I hope you'll join us each week as we set the table for my extraordinary guests who will let you feast on their deep knowledge, life experiences and wise insights. Let's keep the conversation flowing. Please subscribe to the My Warm Table podcast and share it with your friends and networks. Perhaps if they are new to podcasting, take a moment to show them how to download and subscribe so they don't miss an episode either. I'd also love you to join our community on Facebook. You'll find the group at My Warm Table Podcast. Your support is very much appreciated.